Okay, so it's been a very busy news cycle over the past 24 hours. There's been a lot of dramatic developments, both domestically and internationally. So I want to cover some of this, but the main focus on the video is going to be domestic British politics. Um, in the last 10 minutes, it's been reported there's been breaking news that Lord Carrington has passed away. Peter Carrington is notable as the last member of the Churchill government, the last senior British politician to have served in World War II. Um, it's got relatively little attention because there's so many other things going on, but that's quite poignant in some ways. So, looking at his life, he was 99 years old, born in 1919 in, I believe, Chelsea. Let me just get that right. Yeah, in Chelsea. And in parliamentary life spanning almost 80 years, that's truly astonishing. He served first of all as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Food, junior ministerial role, junior cabinet role, I should say, from 1951 to 1954. So that was Churchill's second cabinet. I mean, this is incredible. This is a man who served under Winston Churchill. That's quite, let that sink in. It's quite a thought. He then served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence, High Commissioner to Australia, First Lord of the Admiralty, Minister without portfolio, Leader of the House of Lords, Chairman of the Conservative Party between 1972 and 1974, the Secretary of State for Defence between 1970 and 74, Secretary of State for Energy, Shadow Leader of the House of Lords, and most notably Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, Foreign Secretary, between 1979 and 1982, in which he famously resigned over the Falklands crisis. He then went on to become the sixth Secretary General of NATO, serving in that capacity between 1984 and 1988 in the closing years of the Cold War. So, and he also served as an army major and spent a lifetime in the Lords in hereditary capacity. So he had a very full life, and I think it's kind of a passing of an age because he was the last parliamentary connection to Winston Churchill. I mean, that's quite something. So moving on, it's been an incredible 24 hours for the cabinet. Two major ministerial resignations. First of all, David Davies, and then Boris Johnson. Now, I suppose how people take this depends on what side of the Brexit fence they are on. I'm not going to say very much about this because there's already a lot of commentary going on. At first, I thought, okay, this is going to make May's position untenable. As I understand it, there's already going to be enough signatures sent to the 1922 committee to the chairman, Grant Shapps, to trigger a vote of no confidence. The problem is, who is in a position to really take over? Who would want to take over? Theresa May has one of the most complex jobs any prime minister has had since the Second World War, and who would envy her position? Paradoxically, though, whilst on the surface this might look like a crisis, and in some ways it is, it might actually put her in a stronger position insofar as she'll get the troublemakers, she has the troublemakers out of the way. I mean, the fact that she announced Johnson's resignation before he did sounded almost like she couldn't wait for it. This widely documented Chequers meeting that she had in Chequers, which, if you don't know, is prime ministerial residence in Buckinghamshire. To my international viewers, that's a rural residence outside London for the official residence for British prime ministers. There was a lot of commentary about that. Ministers had their phones confiscated for the day. Um, but it's interesting that there hasn't exactly been resounding support for Johnson. Now, the line goes that basically, if a senior minister wants to take over the job, if he or she wants to wield the knife, so to speak, it's never the person who makes the first move. So Davis and Johnson, from that point of view, may have actually made it more difficult for either of them to become prime minister. I don't know. There's a famous example of Michael Heseltine, who was very ambitious, very capable, but he was the first major minister really to cause big problems for Margaret Thatcher. And he did run for the leadership, and it backfired. Um, in the end, it was a quiet man, John Major, who took over. Could something similar happen here? I don't know. This is a different time. Theresa May is not Margaret Thatcher, and the circumstances I would suggest are different. But definitely, there's no question about it. Outside the cabinet, it looks like a mess. For Theresa May, it may be that she now has more Remainers in her camp around her, which might make her job easier. But certainly, looking at our EU counterparts, they looked a bit fed up. Frankly, I think their impression is, oh, these pesky Brits are, when are they going to make their mind up? Um, and I don't say that flippantly. I think they really are a bit tired of the whole thing. I'm tired of the whole thing. I think a lot of people are. Um, I'll repeat what I said in previous videos. I think there is a bit of a cavalier attitude from some leavers. Like, let's just do two fingers to Brussels and that'll be it. Negotiations don't work that way, and I don't think realistically the Prime Minister can be expected to do that. Now, I appreciate the leave review. Leave means leave. I understand that. I appreciate that. But someone made a point on Sky News, I don't know who she was, but she said, actually, this idea that only the leavers should be listened to doesn't mean that the other 16 million of us should just be ignored. Now, as Nicky Morgan said yesterday, it shouldn't be a case of fighting the referendum all over again. And she argued the whole idea of leaver and remainer is now mute. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case because I think we're still very polarised, and I don't think that's settled. But I don't even know where I was going with that. I think it's very hard not to look at this as being a complete mess. And I'm not convinced the second referendum on whether we stay or go will help anything. But I do wonder what exactly hard levers want. It seems to me they want Brexit no matter what, even if it means hugely damaging relations with the rest of Europe and or a good bit of Europe. I honestly think that they are prepared at Brexit at any cost, and that worries me. Um, so what next? For a very long time now, ever since Grenville, let's look at that time frame, over a year, there's been questions about the Prime Minister's future. It tends to be a thing in this country that embattled Prime Ministers, the daggers come out and it's automatically when are they going to resign, when are they going to resign. It was the same thing with Gordon Brown. David Cameron had his moments, although not as bad as this. Major had his moments. Blair and Thatcher were seen as more presidential style PMs. They were real survivors. I mean, Teflon Tony and the Iron Lady, you know. But I do wonder, if I was a Tory, I wouldn't necessarily think that constantly running down the Prime Minister is particularly helpful. I think all that does is help Jeremy Corbyn. If I was a Tory, which I'm not. Um, I'm not confident about Corbyn government. I don't trust Jeremy Corbyn on national security. So the prospect that all of this could lead to a Corbyn government isn't exactly one I'm excited about. But at the same time, I'm not a conservative, and politically, there's a lot of areas I dislike the Conservatives on. So maybe after 8 years, if we did have a change, it wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing. Because remember, we're in a democracy. So if Jeremy Corbyn was Prime Minister, it doesn't mean everything would be, down to the dear leader. There'd be moderates around him. Um, I don't know. I really don't know. I think obviously there's been big shifts within the cabinet. We have now Jeremy Hunt as Foreign Secretary. He's certainly a big name, but I think the challenge for him might be getting out of the Health Secretary mold. 6 years is a long time to be in any ministerial role. So to establish himself, I think will take time as Foreign Secretary. What else do we have? Dominic Raab. He's not quite a household name in the way David Davies is. He's not as well known as David Davies. So I think, again, he'll take time to establish himself. And the EU negotiators are going to obviously have to know what sort of um, negotiating partner he is. As I understand it, he's got a lot of legal experience, so I'm sure he's capable. But others, I don't have strong opinions on either way because I don't know that much about, for example, Mike Hancock and others. Um, Reshuffles happen in premierships. This isn't unusual, but they are rare enough, especially when you have such big names as Boris Johnson and David Davies, to cause a lot of questions. Who will be the next Prime Minister? Well, and when? I don't see May resigning anytime soon. I think she's a stubborn woman, and I don't mean that in a sort of sexist way. I mean that in it's almost a good thing because stubbornness in a politician can sometimes be good. It can show a toughness, but it can also show an arrogance. I find it very hard to believe May will voluntarily step down after just 2 years when Maggie went on for 11 years, and May apparently, as a young woman, really envied Maggie. So I just don't think she will even humour that sort of situation. I think the only way would be is if she's forced out, and then there really will be bad feelings within the Conservative Party. Um, I can see Sajid Javid as a possible future Prime Minister, but not this time round. I think he could be a PM, but one. Okay, maybe one generation from now, still quite young. Um, Davis is 68, but that wouldn't rule him out. There's been older prime ministers before. Um, Johnson is certainly, someone that everyone speculated for a long time. He's arguably, apart from the prime minister, the best known politician in the country, apart from May and Corbyn. He's certainly the most colourful. Um, Gove, I think he's a serious candidate, but I think a lot of Tories wouldn't trust him because of his betrayal of Boris Johnson. So the dynamics are all being set up. Will there be a leadership contest? I don't know. I certainly hope it doesn't happen between August this year and February next year because I'll be outside the country and I'm someone who likes to follow developments. And if it's happening when I'm on the other side of the world, I'll be a little bit irritated because I want to know what's going on in my country. I like to follow developments. And if there's a general election or a prime ministerial changeover in that time, well, that's that. I was abroad when Margaret Thatcher passed away, and that was obviously a huge story. Anyway, those are just a few things to think about. What's the best situation? I don't know, to be honest. I'm not a member of the Conservative Party, so I have no particular vested interests. But I am British and I want a stable government. And my concern about this situation is the longer this Brexit uncertainty rumbles on, and this has been commented on by many international observers, I think Britain's image will weaken in the world. We were always a leader. There is a very real risk that we will be seen as not a failed state. But this uncertainty is not good. It's not good for the markets. It's not good just for image. So, frankly, when the dust settles, I will be very happy because this thing is going to rumble on and on. Even after we formally withdraw, there'll be that transition period. And I think it is. I don't want what the hard levers want, which is an immediate withdrawal. I think that would be disastrous. I think it would be reckless. But I do want a situation where we reach some sort of, let's say, I wouldn't good feelings, let me put it that way, between this country and our European partners. Because what hard Brexiteers need to understand, we need to work with these people afterwards. These are our neighbouring states. These are countries we have close trade with. So this idea, let's just do two fingers to the EU, is stupid. It's cavalier and it's stupid, and that mentality, frankly, I find regressive. Um, but this is what's happening. This is what Brexit is about, and the European side of things, the EU side of things, need to remember we had a democratic referendum and this was the result. They might be tired of the British, but there are Eurosceptic rumblings elsewhere in Europe, in Italy and elsewhere. So the EU needs to also play this very carefully and not come across as overbearing or bullying. Anyway, and definitely not compromise on issues like joint security. That would be, in my view, a big mistake. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Just a quick word on international news. Apparently, now all the young boys have been rescued from that Thai cave. That's wonderful news. And the coach is on his way out now, so that's fantastic. Like I said, it's sad that the Thai Navy SEAL passed away during the operation, died during the operation, but it's great that all those young lads have got out now. But also in Thailand, there was a big maritime disaster. About over 40 tourists, many of them Chinese, were feared drowned. So that's sad. And there's a lot of other things going on in the world, but I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts.